Check out the Full Press Hockey Podcast with Jim Biringer, the best in the business. It's going to be great.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back. This is the Full Press Hockey Weekly Rumors segment. My name is Jim Biringer. David Calabretta here as well. We are back again for another Rumors Weekly video for you guys, and there's a lot to talk about. We're headed towards Four Nations. A lot of the activity is going to start picking up. We have the March 7th trade deadline. Everything is crammed together. You know, from what I'm hearing, David, and welcome to the program and welcome back, as always, to be with you. I'm hearing a lot of it is now the sellers that we think are going to be sellers are not going to be sellers because they're in playoffs, and everybody has an emphasis on the playoffs and making the playoffs. And with Four Nations coming up, a lot of trade activity may be coming.
Yeah, Jim, happy to be back as always. And look, Four Nations is what, 3 weeks away?
Yeah.
And teams are going to, it's not as clear cut as it was this time around last year. The East, like we've said before, it's wide open. The West is a bit more clear cut, but even at that, there's still a lot of teams fighting for wildcard spots. But I do expect some action to get picked up over the next few weeks. And we're not going to see much selling just yet because there's a lot of teams that are, maybe you could argue, that are overperforming or just really almost in the playoff picture, like Montreal, Philadelphia, Columbus, all these teams are practically either in a playoff spot or right there. And so we're not going to see maybe a Sean Monahan trade before the deadline because, a team like Montreal is still in the playoff picture.
Agreed. And one of those teams that is right in the playoff picture and they haven't really gone away is the Calgary Flames. I mean, they had a big target, they have a big target in regards to Rasmus Anderson on defense, Andrei Kuzmenko's there, Dan Vladar as well. But the big name was Anderson, and, I'd been reporting, and I spoke with Craig Conroy earlier in the year, that he wants to sign him long-term, and, reports came out that maybe they could trade him, maybe they were going to trade Nazem Kadri, but then the team refutes it, the player refutes it, he wants to stay, and he has a 16-team no-trade, so a 6-team no-trade list, and to be honest, yeah, he does. So Anderson does, and a lot of people were connecting to Edmonton or Vancouver. Those teams are on his no trade. He doesn't want to go there. He doesn't want to play for the Canucks or the Oilers. So that's out the question. But I think he definitely wants to stay in Calgary, fits that mold of what they're doing. And I think a lot of it now is going to be status quo for them because they want to make the playoffs. I think we've talked about this before on the program. We've talked about how Calgary wants to add, and I think they want to add a center. We've always brought the name of Dylan Cousins, could be a guy that they look to add. Maybe move New Jersey's first-round pick. If it gets done at the deadline, maybe. If they're in the mix, I don't expect them to fall off. I think they're right where they need to be this year.
Yeah, I mean, Jim, you know how I feel about Calgary and just basically that their pipeline is good but not great. And, they lack star power still to this day. And the only way you could get star power right now is through free agency, a trade, but you need capital and assets, or at the draft. And the reality is they're not going to be picking top 15 this year because it's either going to Montreal or they're going to the playoffs and making a nice run. So, Rasmus Anderson, like I said, and you spoke to the GM, he has no interest in trading him, but it's something you have to consider because although you're stuck on the picture right now, you have to look a few years from now. You have Zane Parrick coming in at number 9. You have no star forward on this roster. There's a lot of guys that could play top 6 minutes, but there's no star forward. And the only way you could get that star piece is by trading your present pieces for future assets. And I think the Flames, what they're doing is great. Everyone expecting them to fall off. And like you said, I don't think they're falling off anytime soon. But the reality is they're not a playoff contender, a team that's going to go to the second, third round. That's my opinion.
No, I mean, but Anderson is a part of their shutdown pair with Kevin Ball, who came over from New Jersey. Igor Sharangovich is there as well. And I think, last year was different. They had all those guys like Toffoli, like Markstrom, Elias Lindholm, Hanifin, Tanev, Zadorov. They had a bunch of guys. They tried, the media tried to, play it up in Calgary this year, but, Nazem Kadri kind of just put a fire out. He's poured cold water on. He's like, guys, we haven't even played a game yet. We're talking about rebuild. And I think the team's going to retool on the fly. And look, if they don't get in, they don't get in. But I could see them using guys as own rentals and then re-explore some things in the summer. And we'll get to own rentals when it comes to Montreal later on, because I think that might be a good strategy for them. give it away. But, for me, for Calgary, I think it's going to be status quo. And if they look to add, maybe they add just like some depth around to help their guys that they have right now because, Huberdeau's coming along nicely. Kadri's playing well, and Dustin Wolf's playing great in between the pipes.
Yeah, I think Rasmus Anderson's a great defenseman. I think he has number one qualities to his game. And the reality is he's a bit older. He's 28. A contract, it's going to be at least $7 million we're talking here, and maybe even more with the cap going up. And I think he's a great, valuable piece to Calgary, but it's something they do have to explore and see what they could get for him because I know he could get a lot on the market today because there's still another year on his contract. Right. But then going back to the trade deadline, and teams, we're not going to see just powerhouses maybe getting rentals. Like you said, there could be a team like Calgary going and get a pending free agent. And a team like, not Montreal, but teams that are in the wildcard position that in other years they would probably stay put. So it's going to be an exciting trade deadline next few months coming up for not only Calgary Flames, but the whole NHL.
Yeah, we mentioned wildcard teams. And let's talk about, we've talked about the Boston Bruins. On this program, we mentioned them and linked them to the Vancouver Canucks, Elias Pettersson and JT Miller. And it goes back to their offseason. Don Sweeney has not done a really great job, constructing this roster. In fact, if you look at their drafts outside of maybe 4 or 5 guys, and I'll give you 6 or 7, maybe if you count later draft picks, but they haven't really drafted well and developed well and found that $6 million player later in the rounds where you can get value. And they've never replaced their number one center. Elias Lindholm isn't that. They want to clear some cap space. They're a team in the wild card. They don't want to really do anything drastic, as Cam Neely said. They want to add. They're looking to add scoring. And as Zig Verkasi was a guest on here earlier in the season when they made the coaching change, said it's the biggest thing is for the Boston Bruins is, they don't have any finishers. They have all these guys that can pass, and they have nobody that can finish. And, Jake DeBrusk in Vancouver, yeah, he's maybe a little inconsistent, but he was a good player for the Boston Bruins. And now they got to go find that on the trade deadline. And it's not going to be easy, but I do think that they're looking at Miller and Pettersson to fill a void at the number one center position.
Yeah, for sure. I think, we said it before, Miller makes a lot more sense for Boston than Pettersson if you look at really the big picture asset-wise, because I don't really see a Boston trade going through involving Pettersson. I'm looking at their prospects, their draft capital. They don't have enough that would really get Vancouver to budge. But Miller, I read something the other day. His value is not as high as people may seem, and it might have to do with a dollar in, dollar out scenario. And look, if a JT Miller trade happens, you think Vancouver could have some interest in getting Nikita Zadorov back?
I think so. They're looking for a top 4 defenseman. He fit well. He fit well with them last year. Yeah,
and it was just a money thing. And the reality is, JT Miller has a hefty cap hit. He makes a lot of money. So it won't be a trade. It won't be the same ballpark as Pettersson. But I think Boston really has to look at their team and make a decision here and say, we have 40 more games. Do we really want to make that push for that wild card spot? Because the Atlantic top 3 is more than locked up right now. With Florida, Toronto, Tampa, whatever. They're close to a wild card spot, Tampa, but they have a lot of games in hand, and Tampa's Tampa, right? So Boston has to really look and say, do we really want to make the playoffs to get bounced in the first round again? Or do we want to, trade, maybe a tough decision here, but trade Brad Marchand, who's a pending free agent. I get he's their captain, and I get, how much it means to be a Bruin. But if you want to kickstart a retool rebuild, it starts with Brad Marchand.
Well, he's a pending free agent, doesn't have a contract. They haven't really discussed things, and it seemed like that David Pastrnak, Brad Marchand thing got things rolling for the Boston Bruins. Look, and that was a name that I brought up to Zig as well on the program. Is a guy like Marchand somebody that you want to trade away? What about, he brought up hypothetically, like Charlie McAvoy, if you really want to do this, break this down, go to your back end. Like, is that somebody you can get a lot of value for to really restock everything? And I don't know if you really want to trade McAvoy, but a guy like Marchand is somebody you have to look at because he has value. Now, right now, the Bruins believe that they can be a playoff team, and I think that's what they're going to do. But you have to look at your roster and say, okay, what can we do to get better? Because they have a void at number one center, and it's been there before Patrice Bergeron and David Krejci left.
Yeah, and Jim, like, to be honest, I don't see them get a 1C this year, other than
No,
this summer. I find it really hard for to see a trade involving Boston and a number one center. So, they're gonna have to look internally and see if they could figure it out, or else they're gonna have to live with what they did last summer.
I agree with that. And, a team also, they're near the bottom of the standings, and we've discussed them a little bit here when we were talking the mess in New York. But the New York Islanders, I mean, they have pieces that teams are going to want, like Kyle Palmieri, like a Brock Nelson, JG Pageau. But the problem is their general manager, Lou Lamoriello, always believes this team is going to be a playoff team. Just get in and see what happens. The problem is the East is so tight. You have Detroit making a run. You have Montreal making a run. Ottawa's right there. Columbus, Philly. Like, there's a lot of teams to pass. New York Rangers are starting to put it together. At some point, the Islanders are going to have to say, okay, if we sell, what can we get? Because they need assets in that team. They've needed goal scoring for a long time, and they just don't have it. And there's value for a guy like Brock Nelson because, as we've mentioned multiple times on this program, everybody needs a center. Everybody needs a consistent 30-goal scorer, and he would get them a lot of value at the deadline.
Yeah, and I find it very concerning what Lou Lamoriello said the other day, that he's doesn't want to hear any trade talk around Brock Nelson, Palmieri. It just shows that he's unwilling to move on from the playoff aspirations, because the reality is the Islanders are, I know a few points separates them from other wildcard teams, but you have to look at how their team is built compared to the other teams fighting for a wildcard spot. I take 4 out of 4 teams over them right now. I take Montreal over them. I take Detroit over them. I take the Rangers over them. I probably even take the Columbus Blue Jackets over the Islanders when it comes to playoff chances. And I find it crazy that Lou Lamoriello isn't even considering trading one of his pending free agents.
Yeah, no, it's been his MO since day one, since he's been with the New Jersey Devils. Towards the end of his career, he didn't want to do it because he always believed his team would get in. And to not move a guy like Brock Nelson that could get you valued, young talent. This isn't when they added those players, the Palmieris, the Pageaus, guys like that for the bubble runs that they had to the Eastern Conference Final, shortened season, stoppage season helps an older team. To play that way over 82 games and not get consistent goal scoring has been a problem for the New York Islanders. This isn't the pre-2005 anymore. He's yet to move off his old ways, and this is why the Islanders are perpetually stuck where they are. If they get lucky and they get in and they go on a run because other teams struggle, they get in, but they get bounced in the first round. And that's what it's been for this team because they just consistently can't get the goal scoring. And when you have players of that ilk on your team that teams are going to want, this is when you start a rebuild. This rebuild should have started after they went to the Eastern Conference Final for the second time. But again, holding on to veterans, making poor selections when it came to the expansion draft. We get rid of Jordan Eberle, but we keep fourth-line guys that you can find anywhere and probably could have gotten back from Seattle, as you saw with Washington and New Jersey that year as well. So just some of the consistent decisions and the decisions that he's made has really hurt this Islanders team. I know they've made playoffs, but is this team really a playoff team?
No, I don't think so. And I also don't think a rebuild is ever going to happen under the helm of Lou Lamoriello. And I think because, you could argue so many things, but he's at the final stages of his career and he doesn't want to start from scratch. He wants to try and win the Stanley Cup. But at the end of the day, if you think the Islanders are Stanley Cup contenders, you have to be delusional.
Yeah, exactly. And I think a lot of people aren't delusional, but Lou is a little delusional. But speaking of a team that could make the playoffs, we talked about it last week. We'll talk about them again right now. The Montreal Canadiens say it every time they win, and they continue to win. How about those Montreal Canadiens? Because the way they're playing with this young team, they're taking the next step in that rebuild. You and I both said it beginning of the season. The expectation was, whether they wanted to admit it externally or not, internally was, we need to be playing meaningful games in March and April. And they're doing that right now in January. They're setting themselves up for a nice run in March and April. And I think it's really bought Kent Hughes, Jeff Gordon time. But I also think that they're going to go with the strategy that Columbus did, remember, years ago in the playoffs. use these guys as own rentals, especially if they remain in this position.
Yeah, and look, I feel like I say this every episode, but we have to look at the next 4 games because they're very important. So their schedule has been crazy in January. They've played Colorado, they played Vancouver, Dallas.
Vegas.
Before January, they had a run of Tampa, Florida, Vegas. And the next 4 games are not getting any easier. Tonight, they have Dallas away. Saturday, they're hosting the Toronto Maple Leafs, Hockey Night in Canada. Sunday, New York Rangers. Tuesday, Tampa Bay Lightning. These are 4, you want to exclude the Rangers maybe, but if you look at recent years, these are 4 Stanley Cup contenders.
Yeah.
And this is going to be a challenge for Montreal, And if let's say they lose the next 4, they're back at square one.
Yes.
Right. So we have to look at the next 4 games. But if we're really looking at today, 2 points off a wild card spot, they have 3 games on Boston. They're in a good spot right now. Very, very exciting spot. The city is buzzing, having fun. Tony Marinaro's dancing on the SIG podcast. It's amazing to see. But Kent Hughes, like he said, he doesn't want to jeopardize the future for any assets whatsoever. But he's not opposed to adding to make the team better this year. And I don't know what that could be. It could be a rental. We've seen last year rentals were pretty cheap.
Yeah.
Calder Trophy went for a 2nd-round pick. And, so could the Canadiens explore that? Maybe. But I also think they're going to look into selling as well. Christian Dvorak, I don't see him on this roster after the trade deadline, regardless of how the Canadiens are built, because they have players in Laval that could take his spot as of today. Owen Beck, Jared Davidson, who's someone who could be making his NHL debut very soon, by the way. Joshua Roy. There's a lot of guys in the minors that could fill in a role like Christian Dvorak. Then you go on the blue line, David Savard. The writing's on the wall for him that he's practically gone after the acquisition of Alex Carrier. But again, that's someone who could probably linger around still if the Canadiens sit in the playoff spot because he brings a lot of value, and especially in a playoff team.
Well, we saw what happened last year with Philadelphia, right? They moved Sean Walker out and they kind of started fading. If they move out Savard, maybe something like that happens. But the way this Canadiens team is playing, they are doing things that I think a lot of people didn't expect, maybe outside of you and us. Jacob Dobé is playing unbelievable right now. I think he's probably going to get a start here or there down the road. I guess this weekend, maybe tonight. I don't know if he's going to play tonight against Dallas.
It's possible.
I mean, it's potential. I mean, when everybody watches this, the lineups will be announced and we'll find out morning skate and everything. But I think that, he's played well and given Sam Montembeault some time off in these much needed games. And he's won some big games against some big teams. So I'm interested to see what's going on there. And, I want to throw this in real quick because, there was a report come out this morning, former Montreal Canadian. I know everybody at the beginning of the season said, why do you got to trade Kovacevic? But, he's been a great ad for the New Jersey Devils. And, contract talks haven't started yet, but he took Simon Nemec's spot in New Jersey this year. And, Nemec, in a Slovak paper, didn't really come out and say he wanted to be traded. But he said it was a tough year. Things could get lost in translation, but I would not be shocked now. And, the Devils may be open now to be moving Simon Nemec. Not that they weren't open to it in years past, but I think they were more reluctant to it because he was going to be a crucial piece to their blue line. But if they lock up Kovacevic, Nemec could be a guy on the move now. And say they try to go after a big scoring winger moving forward. Say, for instance, like they try to move out to go get Brock Besser. Is Nemec a guy that is part of a trade package now? Because teams called about him last year. I know the Calgary Flames wanted him and the Devils said no. Nashville wanted him. They said no. Nashville also wanted Seamus Casey and the Devils said no. So, I mean, is he a guy that's now showing in the AHL? Is this going to be another David Juracek situation coming up? Because Juracek was not happy about playing in the AHL, and it doesn't seem like Nemec is either, but he knows that he has NHL caliber, and if he gets the chance, he says he's going to take it again.
Yeah, well, I mean, like you just said, it reminded me a lot of Juracek when he kind of spoke out in Czech media, and it's a very similar situation right now. And then you guys, the Devils, you re-sign Kovacevic. I look at your right-hand depth chart. You have Dougie Hamilton, Brad Pesce, Kovacevic now, Seamus Casey. Where does Nemec fit here?
Right.
There's not much leg room for him to really get a chance in the National Hockey League. So if I'm the Devils, and I could get my hands on Brock Besser, let's just say hypothetically, I'm throwing the Nemec in a trade package.
Well, I got one for you. Just hypothetical, right?
Yeah.
Hypothetical, because we like to do these trade proposals on here. We know Dylan Cousins is still on the mark, and the Devils, potentially could try to get some center depth, or we could see Cousins on the wing. You throw Nemec there, you try to get something with there, not one for one, but like a package that includes Nemec, a draft pick, and you try to get Cousins. Maybe you sneak Byram out of there too. Who knows? But again, that could be down the road. But I definitely could see the Devils moving on from Simon Nemec now, because they have Seamus Casey. He's playing well. Yeah, he's showing signs of life. But if there's not going to be an opportunity for the Devils to put him in the roster, because they want to add a depth defenseman, they want to add a center, they want to add scoring. The problem is do you want him playing or do you want him sitting? Because if they're just going to add depth and there's going to be a rotation, that's not going to help Nemec either. He's not going to be happy with that. So I think that's a situation to watch moving forward, especially with Simon Nemec. And I had a little fun this morning, and it may come back and bite me in the butt, but Montreal and Simon Nemec. Now everybody's going to connect the dots.
Oh yeah, I'm gonna see your name on some papers, that's for sure. But like if you look at the match and like, basically, the Devils don't have a first round pick to play with at the deadline.
No,
so that piece to play with could be Nemec, and he's worth more than their first round pick.
Yeah,
so the Devils should really explore. They want the top 6 forward. They want to get some depth. They want a lot of pieces at the deadline. Like I said, I want the Devils. I think they should have a very expensive deadline. They should really go out this year, kind of like the Jets. And the Nemec has to kind of be involved if you want that top 6 piece.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. And, we talk about centers around the league, and, everybody seems to need one. John Tavares now is on IR in Toronto. They need to add a center. They're looking to add centers. Nashville, Buffalo has the prize piece in Dylan Cousins. We know Vancouver's got pieces. But again, with teams in the playoff mix, these so-called selling teams, or sellers, as we like to say, there's not a lot of action right now. And it's going to be hard to make a move, right? Like, no one knows what really the value is. Last year, we kind of had to know what the value was because guys have started to move now in January. And heading into All-Star. But now we don't have that. And maybe we'll see it as we get closer to Four Nations. But with so many teams still in the playoff mix, it's going to be hard to see trades happen. I mean, they're going to happen, but we don't really know what the market value is for certain players right now.
Yeah, and I think if it stays this tight in the standings, this could be one of the quietest deadlines yet. Despite all the rumors, all the players out there for sale, there may not be a lot of teams willing to get rid of them, because they're in the mix, right? Like you just said. So I don't know, there's that, like every year deadline, it's hit or miss, right?
Yeah.
But this year, I think it could be very quiet if it keeps this rate.
Yeah, I mean, look, Dallas wants to add defenseman. Edmonton wants to add defenseman. We know John Klingberg's back. His name is out there. But he's more of a depth player than, a top 4 defenseman now. I mean, a lot of teams are looking to add, we saw what Pittsburgh did with Tristan Jarry. That could open the doors for teams to be calling over there. But again, like we said, if it's going to stay this tight, there's not going to be a lot of movement. And, you hope it picks up.
Nah, right. You hope it picks up, because before the roster freeze, the trades were rolling. They were rolling. There was so many trades happening in the span of days and rumors, and since coming back from the Christmas break, it's just been so quiet, but it just shows how competitive the league is right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And speaking up, and we'll wrap it up here with this. Look, the Calder Trophy race is heating up. And, at the beginning of the season, you said maybe it was Mitchkoff, Celebrini, Luke Hughes' name had been in there, but that's, he was eligible last year. But, there's so many good rookies in the league right now. But I think the guy right now that I think's got to be the front runner, Lane Hutson in Montreal. I mean, yeah, you could say this is bias and, a hometown bias and all this. But if you look at what Lane Hutson has done, how can you argue that he shouldn't win the Calder Trophy this year?
Yeah, I'm very passionate about Hudson because there's a lot of people out there who don't really watch the games, and they, their first defense is he can't play defense.
Right.
And yes, that was the case probably 20 games into his career. But if you really look, and there's a lot of analytic people, and you look at the charts, Hudson's on top every single game.
Yep.
And that's not only because he's producing offensively, but defensively he's gotten a lot better. Is there still work to do on defense? Absolutely. That's every young defenseman in the National Hockey League.
Yep.
But what Hudson's doing in Montreal is far more valuable than what any other player in this race is doing for other teams. And this is not a knock on Celebrini, because he's almost point per game with a basement team of the San Jose Sharks. It's not a knock on Michkov, who started really hot, and he's had a cold spree, but that's a rookie for you.
Right.
Another candidate who I think should probably top three, if I had to do my top three today, it'd be Hudson, Celebrini, and number 3, Dustin Wolf.
Yes, 100%.
If we're going on impact level for team, what he's been doing for the Calgary Flames, without Dustin Wolf, there's no playoffs.
No.
And they'd be probably 6th or 7th in the Pacific right now. But that's my top 3 when the season ended today.
Oh, 100%. I think Dustin Wolf has played unbelievable this year. I think he's one of the best young goaltenders in the league right now, and he's showing why. He won, AHL goalie of the year for the Calgary's farm team. And I think you have to put him in there. And I think it has to be Hudson. I think it has to be Celebrini, and it has to be Wolf. I mean, those guys are just taking games to another level right now. So those are, to me, I think those are the 3 front runners for the trophy right now.
Yeah, for sure. You could argue Michkov, maybe. He's for sure going to pick it up. But I think when you vote for Calder, you have to really evaluate the impact for the team. And if Hudson, without Lane Hudson, Montreal is back to square one.
Absolutely. 100%.
It's just, he's playing incredible hockey. And, he's had haters throughout his short career so far. But he's smaller. Scouts probably don't rate him as good because of size. But what he's doing for Montreal, it's, all the historic stats. He's up there with Kel McCarr, Quinn Hughes, Brian Leach. It's just incredible stuff right now.
It is. It's unbelievable what he's doing. So, guys, this has been the Full Press NHL Weekly Rumor segment. I've been Jim Biringer. David Calabretta on the other side. Guys, get it on iTunes, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast. Please subscribe again once to YouTube. Click the like video and keep the views coming, because we appreciate your support. We'll be back again next week for another video. Take care.
Barry Trotz, Nashville Predators, making sure you're listening to Full Press Hockey Podcast.